again. Welcome back to the JMC Reviews, and more particularly, welcome to the 7th year of us celebrating the month of horror together.
I believe the word you're looking for is Now, let's turn on the juice and see what shakes loose.
It's Halloween, my favorite season.
Normally it's tradition to start the month of October by reviewing a Universal Monster Classic film, but alas, I finished reviewing all the Universal Monster Classics last year, so what to do? Why, go back even further, all the way to the silent film era and look at one of the most iconic and influential horror films of the 1920s that just this year turned 100 years old. Today we're going to be looking at F.W. Murnau's Nosferatu from 1922, the original adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Sort of. I'll explain in a minute.
Well, I'm looking forward to that.
Even if you haven't seen Nosferatu, chances are you know the title and have seen the image of the famous main character. Like many people of my age, my first exposure was through the Graveyard Shift episode from the 2nd season of SpongeBob, where they featured the image of the famous vampire.
Nosferatu!
The film was a German production, produced by Enrico Dieckmann and German occultist Albin Grau through Prana Film, a film studio made to produce movies about the occult and the supernatural. Unfortunately, Nosferatu was its only production, and the studio had to declare bankruptcy soon after. Ooh. The following story I'm about to tell probably played a big part in that. I said it was the original sort of adaptation of Dracula, and what I mean by that is the filmmakers did not get permission or secure the rights from Bram Stoker's estate to adapt his famous novel. They took the basic story and pretty much changed all the main characters' names. Count Dracula was now Count Orlok. Renfield is called Knock. And Professor Van Helsing was now Professor Bulwer.
How dare you! The audacity! The unmitigated gall!
So yeah, they didn't have permission to make this adaptation, and shock of all shocks, Bram Stoker's widow, Florence Stoker, sued their fucking asses off. The case carried on for many years, with Florence eventually winning, and per the order of the court, all film negatives were to be destroyed.
Damn!
Luckily, secondhand copies survived, and through that and countless bootleggings, Nosferatu has lived on for the past century. The movie is currently in the public domain. Apparently, I didn't realize this, it didn't enter that status officially until 2019. Nonetheless, it has been made easily available as if it already were through cheaply made VHS and DVD copies, leading to a lot of wear and tear and less than stellar quality over the years. The first time I ever saw Nosferatu in its entirety was when I was about 11 or 12, I think. Yeah. I was a cinema-obsessed freak even back then. But anyway, I was already familiar with the Bela Lugosi adaptation, so finding Nosferatu at such a young age was quite an experience. And it almost feels pointless to describe the plot because it is the basic storyline of Bram Stoker's Dracula, but it's worth going into because there are a few changes. Main one being, although no surprise because it's a German film, the main setting is in Germany as opposed to England.
Well, there it is, kids. My motherland.
Dad, Grandma's from Chicago.
Shut up, Russ.
Estate agent Thomas Hutter, played by Gustav von Wangenheim, is sent by his boss Knock, played by Alexander Granach, to Transylvania to finalize a deal to buy the house across from Hutter's. The client is Count Orlok, played amazingly by Max Schreck. After encountering frightened townfolk, Hutter meets the disturbingly hideous Count, soon finding himself trapped in the vampire's castle. After finalizing the deal, Orlok sets sail for Germany, having his sights set on Hutter's wife, Ellen, played by Greta Schroeder. Hutter escapes, making his way back to Germany on foot. Meanwhile, Orlok munches through the ship's crew one by one. Hutter returns to Germany just as Orlok's ship sails in. Soon the town's residents are bitten and overcome with a sickness that many believe is a plague. The town's leaders forbid the locals from leaving their homes. They can't even take their ill to the hospital. Huh. That's a little close to home after the last 2 years.
All I want is for things to go back to the way they used to be. Back when the world made sense.
Ellen finds a book Hutter picked up while in Transylvania about vampires, or as they call them, Nosferatu. She reads that the only way to kill Nosferatu is for a woman pure of heart to offer herself, let him drink her blood, and stay until the cock. They mean rooster.
I knew that.
And stay with him until the cock crows. Seeing no other way as Orlok devours the town, Ellen gives herself to the Count. As he drinks her blood, the rooster, cock, crows. Orlok gives the biggest "oh fuck" face you've ever seen and burns up on the spot. Ellen calls out to Hutter, he returns and holds her in his arms as she dies. Nock, now committed and completely loony, laments the Count, calling him master.
Ah, fuck it, dude. Let's go bold.
Two of the biggest differences from the original novel come within the last couple of minutes. The biggest one being Ellen, the meanest substitute, sacrificing herself and dying. And in a way, it works really well. Mostly owed to Greta Schroeder's performance, the way you see her come to her decision after reading from the book, and the way she offers herself to the Count is powerful. Another big change, and probably this film's biggest contribution to vampire lore in cinema, is Count Orlok's death by sunlight at the very end. This was the very first time on film that a vampire was portrayed being killed by sunlight, something that has become pretty common in vampire stories since. Sunlight being lethal to vampires was not a part of Bram Stoker's novel, so you can't deny this film had its influence. Now before I give any more positive points, I feel it's only fair to list what I consider the cons of this 1922 silent film. Now obviously, as with most silent films, the acting is completely rooted in the actors' physical performances, and while most of the cast does a pretty good job, some of the facial expressions, as I've come to expect from a lot of silent films, can be a bit exaggerated and over the top and really bring down the dark gothic tone that this movie is going for. There's also a couple of scenes that fall into unintentionally funny territory, the main one being when Dracula is biting off the crewmen of the ship, and the captain and first mate decide to dispose of the bodies by just chucking them into the sea. Yeah, that's the most respectful way to put him to rest.
Oh boy. I'll go get it.
As previously mentioned, this was the first film to introduce the idea that sunlight could be lethal to vampires, and while it makes for a cool finale, it is a bit of a mindfuck when you realize that Count Orlok is walking in many scenes in broad fucking daylight. Although, to be a little fair, this was the 1920s, so they might not have perfected the art of night lighting yet. It is still extremely distracting, although some later releases try to correct this by adding a bit of a dark tint to those scenes. And this is just a personal nitpick, but Max Schreck as Count Orlok, well, I think he does an amazing job at playing a scary-looking vampire. He lacks the sex appeal that I feel makes Dracula a very compelling villain, and while this is not officially Dracula, the character is pretty much the iconic Count in everything but name, and sensuality, just in my opinion, is one of the biggest aspects in what makes Dracula such a iconic villain in vampire and horror cinema.
I'd like some makeup.
Well, you don't get any.
And lastly, Professor Bulwer, the Van Helsing prototype, is pretty fucking pointless. He only appears in a few scenes, and outside of a cool bit with a Venus flytrap, I don't believe he interacts with most of the main cast, and he does not play a part in Dracula's demise, so I feel I really would have saved the film at that time. They just cut him out completely if they're not going to use him to his full potential.
There's no denying purpose, because as we both know, without purpose, we would not exist.
But as I said, those are just the cons that I have. I felt like listening to them was fair, so let's get into the pros, because I do have a lot. Even though I said Max Schreck lacks the sex appeal, he is undeniably one unsettling dude, because holy shit. The simplest of head turns is enough to send chills right down your fucking spine. And say what you will about the film's flaws, but it's a visual masterpiece. Major props to the film's main cinematographer, Fritz Arno Wagner. This motherfucker knew how to frame the actors, particularly Schreck, and did an incredible job taking advantage of the outdoor locations. For a silent film, it does a wonderful job of keeping you interested. You just can't take your eyes off the screen until it's over. Next to Schreck's physically iconic performance, the cast members who stand out the most are Alexander Granak as Knock, also wonderfully grotesque and clearly having a blast, as well as Greta Schroeder as Ellen. She isn't showcased a lot, but she completely steals the show during the climax. Mixed with the film's public domain status, making it very easy to sell and showcase in other movies, it's no surprise that this film has survived so well over the past century. Along with The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, Haxan, and The Phantom of the Opera with Lon Chaney Sr., Nosferatu remains an influential classic of the horror genre. It has been hailed as a favorite of the late film critic Roger Ebert and current Oscar-winning horror filmmaker Guillermo del Toro. In 1979, it had an official remake directed by Werner Herzog and starring the notorious Klaus Kinski as the Count.
I'm Count Dracula.
Will you come to me and be my ally? That be the salvation for your husband. I think I just loaded my pants.
In 2000, we got Shadow of the Vampire, a film about the making of Nosferatu, starring John Malkovich as F.W. Murnau and Willem Dafoe in an Oscar-nominated performance as Max Schreck.
How dare you destroy my photographer!
Did I kill some of your people, Murnau?
Why not the script girl?
I'll eat her later.
The film plays off an old legend that Max Schreck actually was a vampire that was talked into doing a movie, and Nosferatu was his only film credit.
Where did they come up with this stuff?
In 1992, Tim Burton would cast Christopher Walken as a villainous character in Batman Returns, named Max Schreck.
Power surplus, Bruce. Shame on you. One can never have too much power.
So yes, Nosferatu is not for everybody, but if you go into it with an open mind and are a fan of the horror genre, I think you can have a pretty enjoyable experience. As a fan of Dracula, I also find it fun to see where all the differences compare and separate. Personally, my favorite is still the Bela Lugosi version, but re-experiencing Nosferatu as an adult was just as mind-bending as it was when I was 11 or 12, and you can't say you know all their credits, but F.W. Murnau and Heinrich Gallen, who wrote the script, they made a film that has continued to be watched, inspires, and is analyzed to death over 100 years later. You can't say they didn't do something right.
I'm very proud. 100 years from now, we're dead and gone. People will be watching this fucking thing.
Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this rambling review of a 100-year-old vampire film. I will see you again very soon for another horror review. This one, also old, but not quite as old, and definitely a lot bloodier.
You look like an avocado. Had sex with an older, more disgusting avocado. Not gently, like it was hate fucking. There was something wrong with the relationship, and that was the only catharsis that they could find without violence. You will die alone.
That'll do.